One of Catherine of Siena's defining works. She has her letters, well over 300 of them, and she has her writing here, the dialogue, magnificent work, where she talks about conversations between her and God. Specifically, she asked 4 petitions to God. And the order is what's most important, in my opinion. The first is about herself. The second is about the church. The third is about the world. And the fourth is about God's providence. So often, I think, it's a habit of us in our day and age today. When something goes haywire, when something goes wrong, we have that order in reverse. We look to God and say, why? That's not fair. We put him on trial, so to speak, and question him. And then we'll blame the world. Politicians, governments, neighbors if they're bugging us, coaches, teachers, whatever our problem might be. And then if, say we're within the church here, we'll blame the church. And then maybe at the end, we'll look at our own issues. Catherine had a unique ability of understanding herself. She called it the cell of knowledge. Self-knowledge, she said, is key. She prayed constantly, Lord, help me understand who I am. And that's the focus of this talk. Human nature. What does it mean to be human? St. Catherine asked the question, one of her most famous lines, what is my nature? Fire is my nature. Fire. Throughout the church's years and teachings, I think of St. Irenaeus, the glory of God is man fully alive. Catherine saying my nature is fire is to be a human fully alive. But Catherine lived in a rough time. Governments were abusive to people. There was disorder. There were riots. The pandemics that she encountered, the bubonic plague, the waves of it, called the Black Death. Economic situation was rough. The church, too, followed suit. Issues with the Pope and cardinals. It was a mess. Finances were also a mess. But there's something unique about Catherine. Despite all the disorderliness, she allowed God to put her in proper order. What do I mean by that? The human person is made up of the intellect, the will, and our passions. The intellect is ordered to the truth. Our will is ordered to the good, and our passions ordered to that which is beautiful. The 3 transcendentals, truth, goodness, and beauty. Catherine had a remarkable imagination. Remarkable. She would use things to help her out. The bridge is her most famous, but she also used the ocean, trees. She used the cell, as I said earlier, rivers, water, night, anything she could think about to imagine and contemplate the truths of God. With that imagination at the forefront here, I'm going to use a fictional character to help flush out Catherine. Who is that? In the Hunger Games, we run into Katniss Everdeen, a remarkable trilogy, right? Susan Collins gives us this disordered world, this country, Panem. And we have the capital and all the districts, and Katniss Everdeen finds herself in chaos. The capital is focused on distractions and pleasures. And Katniss couldn't stand that. She was filled with the virtue of justice and wanted to make a difference. Just like Catherine of Siena found herself in a mix. With Katniss Everdeen, though, we see that the capital is very attracted to her. It's her virtue. There's something about her that they don't have. Think for a second with Katniss. And remember during the Hunger Games, they made it almost like a TV show, a reality show. And you have those two news anchors, Caesar and Claudius. And what do they refer to for Katniss Everdeen? But the girl that's on fire. And you remember the images from the movies, the dress that lights up in flames. There's something to be said there, though, in the fictional sense, that her virtue, her ability to be ordered in a disorderly centered world, it just came out of her. And it was the only appropriate way for those artists to design her dress. That virtue just poured out. So the name Panem in the Hunger Games refers to a quotation, a phrase throughout history. Panem, of course, bread. Pan de vida, the bread of life. But it goes from a Latin poet, bread and circuses. That's what it comes from. And if you think of the capital, they cared about bread and circuses. What's that mean? Jesus says, man does not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God. Man doesn't live down in this world of worldly things, but the capital did in Katniss Everdeen's time. And circuses, what's that referred to? But just distractions. Distracting ourselves just for a laughter, just for a moment. But the problem was the capital put that at the center of their life. Kind of like in Rome with the Colosseum. Catherine of Siena had zero time for that philosophy. Bread and circuses. Living and being consumed in the world and being distracted by worldly things. Like Katniss Everdeen, Catherine focused on virtue and on that which is higher things. In the middle of the capital, we learn about President Snow, right? That rose garden, that which is beautiful. Even President Snow, as disordered as he was, is attracted to that. He skews the sense of the roses and gives them way more of a smell, magnifies it. And Katniss can't stand it. It haunts her because she knows what's beautiful. So it is with Catherine of Siena, with the world leaders that she ran into and wrote to. She had that scent, that smell. She could just scent out evil, disorderliness. She knew that which is beautiful. And it's funny how fiction and an historical example fit. If you think of Katniss Everdeen and her justice, you're on par with Catherine of Siena. Speaking about the imagination, since Catherine used images, I will too at this moment to flush out human nature again. I'm standing here in St. Catherine of Siena Parish in Dubois. And as I look around, I see the stained glass windows, the organ, everything's in proper order. All the pews, symmetrical, the chairs to the side. I see all these pillars, 5 on each side, symmetrical. There's an altar here, which is raised above everything else, and it's at the center. The tabernacle behind me, at the center of the church. This church itself has the form of the crucifix, the cross. And of course, the steeple goes up toward heaven, symbolic of the human person. The human person, when living in right accord with truth, goodness, and beauty, also reminds us, going upward toward heaven, we're built for God. We know that. Augustine says, my heart is restless until it rests in thee. God, we're built for God. As we look at the stained glass windows, we know that the light, which makes it beautiful, comes from outside the church, not inside. So too with us in baptism. Filled with Christ, we too become colorful with the virtues of faith and hope and charity and so forth. Like the organ, as I said, all those pipes are in order. So too with our passions, our desires, being in proper alignment. And of course, only making a noise when the organist plays, like our passions and desires, in line with the governance of our mind, our reason. The pillars in here reminds me of our hobbies, our professions, our dreams. They have their place and they hold us up financially. They hold us up with friendships. But they shouldn't be at the center where this altar is. How awkward it is when we put something like a hobby right at the center of our life. It doesn't make sense. The church has the altar at the center, sacrifice, where Christ becomes present to us fully. So too with the human soul. Christ at the center. And of course, the chairs and the pews, they need their proper place. Catherine loved to play with images. So I just ran for a few minutes, complete imagination. But that's her hallmark, in my opinion. She wasn't afraid to contemplate the truths and to let the scenes around her in her life, whether a bridge, again, or the ocean, or darkness, remind her of God's love. Remind her of the philosophical and theological truths that she learned from the Dominicans growing up, that she continued to learn over and over again throughout her life. So in conclusion here, with the human person built for truth, goodness, and beauty, our intellect, our will, and our passions, what does it mean to be human during a pandemic? COVID-19. What's it mean to be human in the United States today? We have our fair amount of issues. I don't need to list them. We hear them every night on television. What does it mean to be human today? It has a lot to do with being ordered to truth, to goodness, to beauty, to being open to God teaching us how to order our lives, to be ordered to God, to not place something random and honestly not that important at the center of our life. Catherine lived again 3 waves of pandemics, but she got better. She's one of those classic, honest and true examples of how Christ himself can work and actually thrives in the midst of disaster, pandemic, and struggle. Christ, fearless, be not afraid to enter into the darkness. And I'll return back to Catherine's quote again. What is my nature? Fire. Fire thrives in darkness because light scatters it away, as we learn in the Gospels. St. Catherine of Siena, pray for us.